Free your thoughts and watch them fly.
Debate showdown between Grayson Hawk and Praise I Am on God versus non-God worldview. Which is true? And gentlemen, this is not your first rodeos here in the debate octagon, but it is your first time, if I understand correctly, entering the debate octagon to engage each other. And so I'm excited for this. I know the audience is as well. You've both had many debates on all sorts of topics. So couple seasoned debaters. Let's get acquainted. Let's break the ice a little bit before we get into the showdown itself. Grayson Hawk, let's start with you. Last time you were here was for the epic endgame, in a way, debate with Kent, and so that was a lot of fun. That was just about a week ago. So tell us, Grayson, how have you been since then, and also tell us a little bit about your channel.
Well, yeah, that was probably one of the biggest debates that I've done. It's right now, I think, the most viewed video on my channel. I think the most liked as well. So that was obviously a good debate for me. I gained like 300 subscribers, and I think Kent lost 300 subscribers from that debate. So it was
Fighting
a good
words.
I'm very happy with that one. I'm hoping Praise doesn't lose too many subscribers after tonight. Just a little bit of fun there. But, Praise and I have been on like open mic streams together before, and we've been wanting to do a debate on this for a long time. So I'm happy that we could finally get this set up. And in the last week, I uploaded a video about the true origins of God on my channel. And I think Praise commented and called it propaganda that he can't wait to debunk tonight. So we're in for a good.
I like it, Grayson. You're already bringing the heat. Those are fighting words. And so I can already tell this is going to be good. Grayson, we may have differences in opinions on origins and worldview, but I do appreciate and respect the fact that you never turn down a good debate. And I like that. Anybody who's willing to get in here and do these debates live, I respect, because they're not easy. They also take time in terms of study and prep. So Grayson, appreciate that intro. For those that want to see more from you and your content, they can check the description box for a link to your channel, and you're always willing to discuss the content of your videos. So that's good. Praise AM, you as well. You know, you put out content on the opposite side, but like Grayson, you're always willing to engage in a good, solid debate. So Praise, tell us, how have you been since the last time you were here? And I know you did a couple Trinity debates and then a soteriology debate. I think your last time here for a formal debate was your salvation debate with Sean Griffin. Is that right?
No, it's Soul Sleep.
Soul Sleep. Yeah. You're so busy that you're doing so many debates. So Praise, how have you been since the Soul Sleep debate? And tell us a little bit about yourself and your YouTube channel.
Well, man, I'm excited to be here tonight. It's on the Best Debate channel and ministry on the web. I run a channel focused on apologetics, where we often go live at night to tackle topics like soteriology, philosophy, and apologetic arguments, including challenging issues like slavery. So Grayson looks to be a formidable opponent, and so I'm hoping for an engaging discussion. I truly appreciate Grayson taking his time out tonight for this debate, and we appreciate it, Grayson.
Thank you, Praise, for that intro. For those who want to see more from you as well, they can check the description box of this video for a link to your YouTube channel. So, okay, introductions out of the way. Grayson Hawk, Praise I Am, appreciate that. And format-wise, okay, it's going to be, we're going to have a lot of discussion in this debate. It's going to be more so informal. Now, we will be having opening statements going no longer than 15 minutes. So basically, Grayson and Praise can choose however long they want to within a 15-minute period, just to set the foundation, lay out some arguments and points. Then we're going to jump right into a free-flowing dialogue on the topic. So I want it to be comprehensive, thorough. Whatever points are brought up in the openings, I want to make sure we're engaging all of those points. Okay, Grayson, we're going to get into the first opening statement, and we're going to hand it to you. And so whenever you're ready, just let me know, and floor is yours. Go ahead.
Cool. Well, yeah, my name is Grayson Hawk. I identify myself as an atheist. I think that's important to put out front, because this debate is God versus non-God worldview, determining which one is true. So, I typically, as an atheist, as a naturalist, follow like empiricism, the scientific method. And the scientific method doesn't necessarily prove things as being true. Scientific knowledge is provisional, and it could always change with new data. That's one of the major advantages of science. So I'm going to stick with that tonight. It's not that I'm going to be arguing that the non-God worldview is true. It's more so the fact that I'm just going to be arguing that until I see valid evidence and reasons for the God worldview, then I don't see any valid reason for me to switch positions. So I currently hold a non-God view basically by default. And I know that already this might be controversial from some atheists out there that might say, oh, Grayson's a lack theist. He's not a true atheist, because I don't say, oh, I have a positive belief that there is no God. I simply lack a belief in God. So oftentimes people will accuse me of not being a real atheist. They'll say, oh, I'm agnostic, but I don't know. It's kind of controversial, I guess. The way I think about it is that if somebody asks me, do I believe in God? I'm going to say no. I don't believe in God. It's not that I'm not sure. I'm on the fence. Like, I don't. So that's why I think I'm an atheist. If you disagree, if you think I'm a lack theist or whatever, to me, you can call me whatever you want. My position is basically the reason why I'm an atheist is not because of some argument about, oh, the problem of evil or divine hiddenness. It wasn't like I was convinced to be an atheist based on some positive evidence or something. The reason I'm an atheist is because I've always been an atheist. I wasn't raised in a religious household. My parents were like, if you have questions about religion, you can go down to a church and you can ask a pastor there if you want. And when I got old enough, that's what I did. I had a couple conversations with a few pastors at a few of the churches in my area, and I went to Bible camp in 5th grade, actually. I asked them a ton of questions. And ultimately, I just didn't see a good reason why I should believe that any of it is true. So therefore, I have a non-God worldview because I just wasn't convinced. So the way that I'm approaching this debate tonight is to try to go in with an open mind. I'm not closed off. I'm not just over here, blah, blah, blah. There's no God. There's no God. I want to come in here open-minded. I'm open to changing my mind if I am presented with a sufficient reason to do so. So my whole thing is that in order for me to believe something is true, I need a good reason to believe it. That reason can be an argument. It can be empirical evidence, but I need something. I need something to be a sufficient reason for me to believe. So that's where I'm coming out with it. I'm hoping that Praise can present maybe some reasons justifying why his God would be true. And then we can talk about those reasons. And hey, I'm open to being converted tonight. Not 100% sold on every position. I don't know everything. So I'm just going out this with an open mind. I want to hear the arguments, and I want to talk about the specific arguments and see if they are convincing and if they are sufficient that would make me a believer. So that's my position on things. There's a tons of reasons why I think that it's just, there's maybe some reasons why I'm hesitant into believing certain religions, mainly because there's so many different ones out there and they change and evolve over time. And it just seems like, if somebody stumbled upon a true one, why is it not more obvious? It's just like we are constantly seeing religions splinter and break apart into sects and have, disagreements and schisms, and new religious sects are constantly being created. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like, 70 to 80% of the people are the same religion that their parents were, which doesn't seem like that would be the case if any of these religions were true. Like, you just so happened to get really lucky and you got born into the one true religion. I don't know, man. I'm skeptical, and I'm open to hearing the actual arguments and evidence for God tonight. So that's how I'm going to be approaching this. I will just go ahead and cede the rest of my time to the open discussion, and I will let Praise hopefully provide some of those reasons. Although one last thing is I want to specify what I will and would not accept as evidence, right? So I would accept empirical studies, peer-reviewed studies as evidence. I would accept logical arguments as evidence. And what I would not accept as evidence would be like quotes from individual people. Like, I'm sorry, but I just, if you're going to be arguing by just trying to say, well, so and so said this, like, I don't care. Like, even you can say, oh, but they're a physicist. Okay, well, did they say that in a published peer reviewed study? Or did they just say that and then it's being quote mined out of context to try to justify whatever claim? Like, I'm sorry, but quotes from individual people are just not going to cut it as sufficient evidence for pretty much any position that you're going to try to use them to support. Like scientific, philosophic, none of these. Like if you say, oh, well, the consensus is this because this one physicist says that, like I could find just a counterexample, and you're not going to believe that because an individual quote from an individual physicist doesn't mean anything. I could give you a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche saying that God is dead. Oh, he's a very respected philosopher. That doesn't mean that his quote does any justification for the claim. So I'm not going to accept just quotes from individuals tonight. If you are going to quote, make sure it's a quote from something peer reviewed, it's a study, it's empirical, it's data, or it's an actual deductive argument. So with that, I will just open it up to praise, and I'm going to be listening and taking notes.
All right. Thank you, Grayson, for helping us to set the foundation for tonight's discussion, God versus non-God worldview. We know now where you're coming from, and what we're going to do is hand it to Praise to present what he believes are good lines of evidence for the God worldview. And then we're going to hand it to Grayson to kick us off in a discussion where he can lead the way and challenge some of your arguments, Praise. So this is going to be good. I'm excited. To the audience, more and more people joining us. Do send in your questions on tonight's topic, God versus non-God worldview, which is true. Praise. Let's reset the timer. And you have up to 15 minutes. I'll start the timer on your first point.
Is the presentation up on the screen?
Yes.
Oh, good. So here we go. The Christian worldview versus the non-God worldview. And tonight, I'm going to present a logical proof of God, a metaphysical proof of God, and also a scientific proof, or I would say evidence, which would be very compelling. I would call it proof in the colloquial sense. Well, let's get started. The ontology of classical logic necessarily proves the existence of the Christian God. The axioms regarded as universal in classical logic are laws of thought, which include the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, the law of excluded middle. These principles are not derived from other premises, but serve as the foundational building block for logical reasoning within that system. This is a citation from Encyclopedia of Philosophy. According to Dale Jacquet, 2006, there exists a universal concept of logic that underlies and unifies all distinct logical systems. Introduction Philosophy Logic Today. The classical laws of logic possess specific metaphysical characteristics. They are immaterial, meaning they are absent of physical properties. They are immutable. They are unchanged by time. They are omnipresent. They are unbound by nature. An absolute, what does that mean? Their negation inherently assumes their validity, making them a reductio ad absurdum vern polythres or poithres. Aristotelian logic is considered prescriptive because the process of negation entails intentionality, implying free will. This is Avi Zion. He's PhD inductive logic, a thematic compilation encyclopedia, also the encyclopedia.com laws of thought. Tim Nichols highlights that the laws of logic are universal, a unitary metaphysical class, yet exhibit diversity within particulars, reflecting a threeness within their unity. So here's the conclusion. Hence, since the laws of logic are omnipresent, absolute, and therefore necessary, immaterial, immutable, prescriptive, and universal, while consisting of three distinct yet interdependent particulars, only the Christian God can account for these attributes. Furthermore, only the Christian worldview provides a framework to harmonize the unity and diversity inherent in one in the many. And this brings me to the problem of the one and many. The core dilemma: how can unity and diversity coexist without one overwhelming or negating the other? Unity represents order, universals, or overarching truths. Diversity represents individuality, particularity, and multiplicity. Philosophical challenge, explaining how diverse entities relate to a unified whole. Example, universal laws governing particular phenomena. Avoiding extremes of monism. So it's an overemphasis on unity, denying diversity, or pluralism, overemphasis on diversity, denying unity. The Christian worldview's resolution. 1. God as the source of unity and diversity. God's nature embodies both unity and diversity in perfect harmony. Unity, God is one, Deuteronomy 6:4. Diversity, God exists as a Trinity, three distinct persons, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, sharing one essence. So creation reflects God's nature. The created order is both unified and diverse, mirroring God's character. For example, unity of universal laws, example, gravity, and purpose, diversity in the multitude of created beings and phenomena. So why this resolution works? It avoids monism. God is not an abstract force, but a relational being who affirms diversity. It avoids pluralism. God's sovereignty ensures coherence and purpose in the diversity of creation. It integrates unity and diversity. The Trinity provides a metaphysical model where neither unity diversity dominates but complements the other. Now we have the classical logic as a syllogistic proof for the existence of God, known as the tag. Premise 1. If the classical laws of logic are universal, immaterial, immutable, omnipresent, and absolute, then they require a source that possesses these same attributes. Metaphysical principle effects must reflect their cause. Premise number 2, the classical laws of logic are universal, immaterial, immutable, omnipresent, and absolute, established by their characteristics as described in classical logic and metaphysical reasoning. Conclusion 1, therefore the classical laws of logic require sources that is universal, immaterial, immutable, omnipresent, and absolute. This is via modus ponens from premise 1 and premise 2. Premise number 3, if a source exists that is universal, immaterial, immutable, omnipresent, absolute, then this source aligns with the traditional conception of God. The definition of God is a necessary being possessing these attributes. Conclusion 2, therefore the source of all classical laws of logic aligns with the traditional conception of God. This is via modus ponens from conclusion 1 and premise number 3. In the final conclusion, the classical laws of logic by their very nature imply the existence of God as their transcendent foundational source. Now we're going to move into quantum mechanics, the scientific argument for God. So we're going to move into quantum mechanics, idealism, and then God in this argument. So firstly, we're going to start with scientific anti-realism confirmed. Quote, one of the more unsettling discoveries in the past half century is that the universe is not locally real. In this context, real means that objects have definite properties independent of observation. For example, an apple can be read even when no one is looking. That's realism. Local means what objects can be influenced only by their surroundings, and that any influence cannot travel faster than light. So investigations at the frontiers of quantum physics have found that these two principles cannot be true. Instead, the evidence shows that objects are not influenced solely by their surroundings and may also lack definite properties prior to measurement. End quote. This is Daniel Garisso, The Universe is Not Locally Real. And physics Nobel Prize winners proved it, Scientific American, October 6, 2022. Now we're going to go into idealism confirmed. Stuart Boehmer, in his paper, Quantum Theory and Idealism, says materialism is dead. Atomism, reductionism, and analysis are dead. The world is not built of atoms the way a house is built of bricks. The world is not bottom up or analytic, but top down and synthetic. The macroscopic world is fundamental, and the microscopic world is a derivation of an interference. A derivation or an inference, not the other way around. The hypothesis that consciousness is fundamental suggests that the seemingly substantial and solid material world is an efficient hallucination created by anthropomorphic attributions of bodily sensations and memory to the outer world. And now we're going to move into God confirmed as the non-local observer. Stephen Priest, in his peer-reviewed paper, Quantum Physics and the Existence of God, states, interpretations of quantum physics presuppose the reality of consciousness. But if a minimal realism about the external world is true, then the consciousness presupposed by quantum reality cannot be only that of the scientific observer, cannot be only local, but must be global. Global consciousness is argued to have all and only the essential properties of God. The quantum reality depends on God's consciousness, and the physical world depends on quantum reality. Therefore, the physical world depends on God's consciousness. And we have quantum mechanics requires an immaterial soul. This is Dr. Fred Alan Wolf, interviewed by Robert Kuhn closer to the 2017. Here's what he says. Listen closely. There's something very fundamental I'd like to explain about how quantum mechanics may apply here that is not being considered by any of the classical neurophysiological models. This is what is called the observer effect, or if you will, the ability by which one can move, change, or cause series of events to occur, such as determining the next word after this word and the word after that through intent. Intent in this case would involve the collapsing of the wave function along a given trajectory, which cannot be explained in a mechanistic way. We call this the quantum Zeno effect. It has different names, but it essentially states that if you observe a quantum system repeatedly, you can actually alter the path by which that system evolves. You could, in theory, have such a system functioning within a purely materialistic framework, except for one thing. Where is the observer? Here's the problem. If you reduce everything to mechanical processes, then everything would operate in a purely mechanical way. There would be no shaping, no collapsing of the wave function. Without an observer, there would be no directed movement or willful interaction. So you need an observer. It seems evident to me that it cannot be material. When material things interact, when atoms interact, they follow the laws of quantum mechanics, which predict possibilities multiplying into further possibilities. But when an observer interacts with these processes, it narrows the field, eliminating certain possibilities so that others are realized. From this, I conclude that since we need the narrowing process, something cannot be explained by material interactions. The thing driving the process could not itself be matter. If it were, it would simply result in endless multiplication of probabilities, as predicted by the quantum mechanics. However, if there is shaping, narrowing, or focusing occurring, then there must be a non-material focuser present. I call that spirit. Now bring in the final proof, the metaphysical proof of God's supererogation constitutes moral perfection, ergo God exists. Russell A. Jacobs, in his paper Obligation, Supererogation, and Self-Sacrifice, explains that supererogatory actions are by definition morally good or praiseworthy acts that are not obligatory for an individual to perform. These actions go above and beyond duty, involving a level of self-sacrifice or risk, or self-sacrifice that surpasses what could be morally required of a person. David Hyde, in his work Status and Ethical Theory and Supererogation, outlines the defining features of supererogatory acts. An act is supererogatory if and only if, number one, it is neither obligatory or forbidden. Number two, its omission is not wrong. It does not warrant formal, informal sanction or criticism. And number three, it is morally good, both in its intended consequences and intrinsic value, as it exceeds the demands of duty. Number four, it is performed voluntarily for the benefit of another. It is therefore meritorious and praiseworthy. Hyde emphasizes that supererogation entails moral perfection, actions that transcend moral duty itself. Such acts which go beyond the well-defined boundaries of duty are key indicators of moral perfection. While duty is characterized by a minimum required threshold, supererogatory actions follow for an indefinite range of degrees of goodness and lack prescribed limits. Lastly, Dr. J.M. Katz highlights the unique nature of supererogatory morals, describing them as possessing non-natural properties that are sui generis. Non-natural properties are considered causally impotent and not discoverable through empirical or scientific methods. These properties include sui generis and supernatural qualities are metaphysically unique, irreducibly normative, and are distinct from any other type of property. So Katz further argues that these supranatural properties challenge existing scientific principles such as the causal closure principle, which holds that all causes of physical events are physical. The existence of non-natural supernatural properties raises profound philosophical questions about how such moral phenomena might coexist with or transcend the physical world. And lastly, syllogistic proof of God through supererogatory acts. Premise 1, morals can have either natural or non-natural properties, and they can be either obligatory or non-obligatory. Premise number 2, if morals have non-natural properties and are non-obligatory, then they must possess supernatural and or sui generis properties. Conclusion 1, supererogatory acts are demonstrably non-obligatory and possess supernatural or sui generis properties, which align with the principle of moral realism. Premise 3, if supernatural and or sui generis properties exist, then a god, gods, or something beyond nature must exist to provide an ontological basis for these properties. Conclusion 2, the Christian God exists because he uniquely and exclusively possesses the necessary ontological qualifications to serve as the foundation for supererogation, due to his perfect and supererogatory nature, which encompasses these non-natural properties. And with that, my opening is now concluded. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Praise I am. Gentlemen, that wraps up our setting of the foundation for tonight. We now know where you guys are coming from. I appreciate the points, arguments, and positions that have been laid out. We've got ourselves a high-level debate tonight. Supererogation, supererogatory, ontological. These are some big words. Say those 10 times fast. So, okay, gentlemen, all jokes aside, let's have some fun. This is going to be good. Grayson, let's hand it to you to kick us off in our open discussion. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So I think that most people kind of know me as a science guy, being a fan of science. So I think I would like to start with the science-y one of your arguments. You had the argument from the laws of logic, the argument from quantum mechanics, and an argument from supererogation, which was a new word for me. So I'm excited to get to that one. Maybe I'll save that one for the end. Can we start with the quantum mechanics one?
Absolutely.
I would like to share my screen here, Donnie, and I'm pretty sure I've shown you this study before. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. I can.
So the experimental test of local observer independence. So this is how I want to address your points about quantum mechanics, and you're saying that a conscious observer is necessary to collapse the wave function, because this is an actual experiment, and they got the data from it. Here's the actual data. And so this is not just like a quote from somebody. This isn't like some philosophical thing. Like, they're actually doing the measurement here. Here's the setup for their experiment. So they're actually testing whether or not there's this old thought experiment from the 60s, Wigner's friend. And so Wigner came up with this idea to prove that consciousness was necessary to collapse the wave function. Wigner used to say the same things that Praise is saying about consciousness and quantum mechanics. But Wigner changed his mind in the 80s, and this is part of the reason why, is that at the time it was just thought experiments, but now they've done it empirically with actually just the actual data, and they showed that you can collapse the wave function with a non-conscious observer. So for this experiment, the observer is just a measuring device. They have their observer defined right here, where they say that clarify the notion of an observer. Formally, an observation is the act of extracting and storing information about an observed system. So an observer is just any physical system that can extract information from another system by means of interaction and store that information in physical memory. So they're saying here, like, their observer is just a measuring device. The formalism of quantum mechanics does not make a distinction between large, even conscious, and small physical systems. So there's, in quantum mechanics, that what Praise is saying just does not come, it's not part of quantum mechanics. There is no necessity of a consciousness to collapse the wave function. Consciousness is not anywhere in the equations of quantum mechanics. It's not necessary for quantum mechanics. That's my first point.
Okay, is this a rebuttal or is this like crosstalk? I'm not completely
It's
sure.
dialogue.
Oh,
So you
okay,
can
okay.
respond, Praise.
Very good. So what Grayson is trying to propose is something called decoherence, where the environment itself is the collapser of the wave function. I'm going to give 3 papers that debunks that. So the interaction-free experiment by Mark Kasevich, this shows that measurement detects the elementary particle without an interaction occurring between it and the measuring device. So if you want to check that out, it's called, these are papers, by the way. These are not just quotes.
Okay. What's it called?
The Interaction-Free Experiment. And it's by Mark Kasevich, Kasevich. And also, there's 2 other papers. I'm going to quote those as well. The Quantum Chi-Shear, the CHESIR experiment by Raul, R-A-U-L, Korea, C-O-R-R-E-A. And this paper shows that quantum particles are spatially separated from their properties. They actually demonstrated that. And lastly, I mean, this is from Anton Zeilinger, who is the Nobel Prize winner. The name of this paper is Non-Local Quantum Eraser. And this shows where measuring devices are separated from each other from several kilometers. And so you can look at those 3 papers. I would just push back, and I would also say, how do you get around the measuring problem?
Okay, so that's a lot to tackle right there. I'm not familiar with all these papers. I'm just reading a little bit on that first one of the interaction-free measurement. I'll have to check that out. But it's sounding like a 2020 paper just looked at that and was saying that it's because of the properties of the particle being able to travel locally through regions in which the particle itself is excluded. That's very interesting. I'll have to look more into it. But this does touch on Zeilinger, on what he won the Nobel Prize for, and something that I commonly see miscommunicated, right? And you touched on this in your opening. You said that Zeilinger and experiments like what he won the Nobel Prize for show that reality is not locally real. And you use this as saying that it's not real at all. But actually, I think that you're skipping over that term locally, which is very, very important. It's not locally real. So you can either say that reality is non-local, or reality is non-real, or it's non-real and non-local. Those are 3 different possibilities. You can't just ignore 2 of them and only go for reality is not real. That's 1 out of the 3 possibilities. But the majority of scientists say that reality is non-local, not that it's non-real. So it really is just up to interpretation at this point, whether or not their results show it's non-local, non-real, or both. I just want to make that point. Any pushback on that?
Yeah, I would actually like to talk about the Wigner. Are you familiar with the Wigner's friend experiment 2019? By Massimiliano. Yeah, it's by Massimiliano Porietti.
Yes, that's the paper I just had up on screen.
Right. So what they show is that in these 6 entangled photons who create or 2 alternate realities, and they find it's not real. So even in that paper, they show, I mean, this is actually evidence of a non-real local reality.
Again, no, they showed it's non-locally real. You cannot skip over that word non-local, right? They showed it's non-locally real. So I'll just tell you, right now, the consensus among quantum physicists is that whatever the fundamental level of reality is, it's non-local, which means, I guess we haven't really clarified what this means yet. Local reality would mean that things can only interact when they're right here, touching together in space. A non-local reality means that you can have this sort of spooky action at a distance, this quantum entanglement, a violation of Bell's inequalities. And so that's what was shown in the experiments. So you can't just say, like, it's like if I had an experiment that showed you that the sky was not purple, and you're saying, well, see, look, it has to be red. No, that's one of the available options, but it can be other colors as long as it's not purple. All those experiments showed was that whatever reality is non-locally real, which means that it could be non-local, or it could be non-real, or both. You can't just pick one and then ignore the other two.
Well, I mean, let's focus on what's being said, though. Quantum reality does not depend on anything classical. There is no macroscopic Newton-Einstein world more fundamental than the quantum level.
Mm-hmm. So we can agree here that the most fundamental level of reality that we know about scientifically are the fundamental particles. We can agree with that, at least for science. So you might say that there's another layer that's more fundamental with quantum information, but that's not consensus yet. It's nobody knows for sure if that's more fundamental or not.
Well, the issue is that when an observer does an experiment, the choice of the observer before the experiment even begins decides the outcome of the experiment. That means the system cannot be, so the consciousness or the observer cannot be physical, or else there'd be nothing to collapse.
So the study that you just cited, that 2019 study, shows that that is not the case, because that study shows that one of the non-conscious measuring devices collapsed the wave function and acted as Wigner's friend in the Wigner's friend thought experiment, which in the thought experiment has to be a conscious entity. But in the real experiment, they showed that observer does not have to be conscious in order to make a measurement and collapse the wave function. They proved that experimentally.
Yeah, there's still okay, but then you run into the von Neumann chain and also the measurement problem. That doesn't resolve the measurement problem.
So I agree that the measurement problem remains unresolved. Okay, we can agree that the measurement problem is not resolved. For those of you that might not follow quantum mechanics, like the measurement problem is basically like when you do a measurement, why do you get the value that you get? Quantum mechanics can tell you, oh, 30% of the time you'll get this, 70% of the time you'll get this. But when you actually do the measurement, why is it that you only measure one and not the other? That's the measurement problem. Nobody knows. Decoherence, some people thought that could solve it. It doesn't, but it does at least explain a lot about the relationship between micro and macro scales, quantum and classical. And I agree with you that as our current level of knowledge right now, the quantum is the most fundamental level of reality that we know about, but we know that there's more to the story because we don't have quantum gravity. So we know that we don't have the whole story. We don't actually understand the fundamental layer of reality with current science.
I have a little quote for you. I just want to see, it's not that long. It's kind of a short quote. I just want to see how you respond to Neil deGrasse Tyson, what he says. This is from Cosmos Possible Worlds National Geographic, but here's what he says. On the smallest possible scale we've ever discovered, the quantum universe, the mere act of observation changes reality. You're not going to believe this, but we can change the pattern on the far wall simply by not watching which slit the photons pass through. I know it sounds crazy, but in every trial ever conducted, the outcome depends on whether or not the experiment was observed. So the reason we didn't get the interference pattern earlier wasn't because we chopped up the light into single photons. It was because we were observing which slit the photons pass through. This is Neil deGrasse Tyson. Like, okay, how would you push back against that?
No, I don't disagree with that quote, surprisingly. I mean, I'm not a big Neil deGrasse Tyson fan, but I surprisingly do agree with that quote. Again, I just want to emphasize here that quantum mechanics does not stipulate that an observer has to be conscious. There are non-conscious observers. They're measurement devices in quantum mechanics. There's nothing inherent about quantum mechanics that means it has to be conscious. I would like to share with this because I do have an issue with, it seems like every time you want to justify one of your claims, you want to provide a quote from some individual to try to support that. And again, I don't put much stock into the quotes of individuals because scientists be saying some crazy stuff sometimes. I want to see them actually put their money where their mouth is and show me the data that supports them. Or like, I like when you cited the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. That's a valuable source. Here's what I wanted to share. This was a little bit, marginally, just a little bit better than quoting individuals. This is a survey of quantum physicists that were at a convention on the quantum foundations, right? So this is decent. Wait, where's my screen? Okay, yeah, here it is. So this is what, when they were asked about the observer, this is what the physicists said. So they said the observer is a complex quantum system, and this other person says the majority opinion is it plays a fundamental role in the application of the formalism, but plays no distinguished physical role. And then the other one should play no fundamental role, whatever. And only 6% of people said that the observer plays a distinguished physical role, e.g., wave function collapse by consciousness. This is by far a fringe position among actual quantum physicists. Like, yes, you might be able to provide a quote from that 6% there, but there's still only 6% of the field. You know what I mean? Like, I could provide many more quotes from the other 94%. This is why I don't put stock into quotes from individuals.
Well, I mean, was this before 2022?
Yes.
Well, then I would argue that the newest developments from the Nobel Prize winners changed the whole framework of quantum physics.
They were awarded the Nobel Prize in 2022, but the work that they were awarded it for had been done in the 70s and the 60s and the 80s and 90s. So like the work had already been done and published, and they do actually address it in this survey. Oh, crap. I thought I minimized it, but I didn't. Okay, here we go. It was the question on, sorry, I forget what the order of the questions, but there are many questions here. Here we go. So what is the message of the observed violations of Bell's inequality? This is the work that won the Nobel Prize in 2022. So this is exactly what you're bringing up. So the vast majority here, the vast majority say that local realism is untenable. That's what we've agreed to, okay? I agree local realism is untenable. I'm a fan of non-local realism. So they have here, unperformed measurements have no results. Ben, this is 50-50. It's not a consensus either way. You know, some notion of non-locality is up here with 36%. The point I'm trying to illustrate here is that there's not a strong consensus in the field yet. You can't just provide a quote from a physicist and then say, look, there's a consensus. They all agree, because they don't.
Are you familiar with the consensus gentium fallacy?
Not specifically by name, but I can assume by context clues that it's a fallacy of appealing to the consensus, meaning therefore it must be true.
Correct. Yeah, it denotes that. It's like an appeal to an authority. I know you can appeal. I've said this is where T jump, he goes off on it, but he misunderstands the appeal to authority fallacy. You can appeal to authorities for particular things.
Yes,
but you need a collective. There has to be something tangible there before you just say it's true.
I think worded a little bit different is that you can appeal to authorities, and as long as both of the individuals in the debate agree that they are the authority, like in that, if both people can agree that that's an authority, then you can appeal to the authority. But if there's a disagreement about who the authority even is, then it doesn't really work. But this, I'm not trying to argue right now that reality is non-local because the majority consensus of quantum physicists say so. I'm just saying that there is no consensus in the physics right now, in the physics community. There's no consensus about the true fundamental nature of reality. Quantum foundations, like if you ever take a course in quantum foundations, there's not a whole lot of consensus in that field. There's a lot of ideas, a lot of arguments, a lot of philosophy and high-level theoretical physics, but not a lot of like oh, it's definitively this is the answer and we all agree about it. There's not a lot of that.
Well, I don't think science will ever get to that, because most of it is induction, and like induction doesn't even allow for things to be certain. I don't even think you could argue for certainty in science.
Sure. I mean, I would agree that like it's never 100% certain about anything, but like that doesn't mean that you cannot have like consensus. And that consensus is meaningless just because it's not 100% certain and it's provisional and could change with new data. I don't really think that defeats the fact that, you know, you can have a scientific consensus, and that's pretty much like the best means that you can have of describing or understanding reality, in my opinion. Like we have consensus of like germ theory, right? I mean, that's pretty good.
No, right. I agree that there's certain things that are pretty persuasive in science, but I'm going to go back to realism, because you think that, okay, let me just make this clear. Do you agree that quantum mechanics has ended that old canard that objective reality is physical outside of us locally, independent of us locally? Do you actually believe there's still something there objectively real?
Personally, yes, I do. But in terms of like, it's not really about my personal beliefs. I don't think that there is like there's no consensus that quantum mechanics has overturned the notion of like objective reality being real or physical. Like the majority of quantum physicists are still like materialists. So if they're the ones that understand this best and they're not agreeing with you that quantum mechanics overturns materialism, then I think there might be a disconnect, you know?
Oh, come on, Grayson. You know that some of these scientists, they have their own presuppositions and biases. They come into it.
That's true.
I wouldn't weigh, and I wouldn't weigh your belief on what scientists, you know, because there's materialists out there. That doesn't mean anything. People can hold contradictory views.
Well, I mean, that's a good point, but it's just is like, you know, for the people that are experts in quantum, like if you're trying to make the claim that quantum mechanics shows that there's like reality is not objectively real and is not like physical, then it's just really weird that the people that are the foremost experts in this thing that supposedly does that don't also have that conclusion. You know what I mean? Like, it just seems like all the people that claim that quantum mechanics shows that objective reality is not real, like, they're usually not quantum physicists. I mean, I'm sure that you have quotes ready to go from quantum physicists, but they're like in that tiny percent is my point. And like, I don't know, man. It's just as weird that if it's so obvious that quantum mechanics debunks materialism, it's so weird how there's so many materialist quantum physicists.
You know, I mean, okay, so you're right. I can see like how you would be confident and maybe, but to me, I think we got to look outside the box sometimes and not just hold to what is mainstream, because how many things have been mainstream over time and have been overturned? And like, do you see how flimsy that is?
But okay, the thing is though, is that when you overturn the scientific consensus, it's done by providing strong enough evidence that overturns it, that convinces everybody, hey, oh, that was wrong. We got this new evidence and that convinced us. So like, if we're going to overturn the scientific consensus and show that quantum mechanics actually debunks materialism or something, then we would need that evidence, which so far, I don't think that the field recognizes that any of that. I don't know what evidence that would be. But really quick, I want to make the point before we go too off in the weeds. Yeah. I think it's important to make the point here that, yes, I'm a physicalist. You, I think, are an idealist. But like, we're supposed to be arguing about the God versus non-God worldview, and like I think that there are atheist idealists out there. So it's like, even if physicalism was not true and idealism was true, I don't really see how that gives you more evidence towards your God. You know what I mean?
Well, no, they be more pantheists. I don't know. I'm not aware of any idealists, especially in any literature that hold to an atheistic idealism.
The one I was thinking of, and I haven't read like a ton of his work, but this is just off the top of my head. Like when I was saying it, the first person that came to mind is Donald Hoffman, who I'm pretty sure is an atheist, or at least his philosophy is atheistic. But he maintains that the fundamental nature of reality is consciousness. Like consciousness is the
Right.
fundamental, and that he's saying a lot of the same things you are about how this reality is illusory or whatever. But he doesn't say that, oh, it's from a source of a deity or anything. He has an atheistic framework for this whole idealism of his. So my point is just like, even if I were to concede for the sake of this debate all of your points about physicalism and idealism, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, quantum mechanics debunks physicalism, and I'm an idealist now, and this whole reality is nothing but an illusion, that still doesn't get me any closer to God. Like, I could just say, okay, Praise, you've changed my mind. I think reality is not real. It's all illusory, but I think we're in a giant simulation that's being created by aliens in an alternate universe, and the creator of that universe is some thing called Fleeble Blorp. And like, I don't know, like, it doesn't get us any closer to a God necessarily. Like, you know, there's another, I don't know, man. It's just like, what's the actual argument for God here?
Well, I would just go back to my quote, or my, that discussion that Fred Allen Wolf had with Robert Kuhn, and he was saying it cannot, the observer has to be spirit. So yes, it isn't necessarily.
But why?
Because anything that's physical within the system, like the quantum Zeno effect, like you're familiar with that, right?
Yeah.
So it's everything in quantum mechanics, when it's not observed, is just it's an infinite amount of probability. So something centralizes it and focuses it down to and collapses it into something simple and makes it real. The shaping, it's called the shaping of the wave function.
Okay, Praise, I'll say this because I also used to be confused about this whole notion of wave function collapse and what it meant physically until I took quantum mechanics 1 and 2 in college. So then I used to think that there was a physical process that happened when something collapsed the wave function and makes it real. And no, like actually doing the physics, having the discussions with the actual quantum physicists, like for hours in office hours, they really hated me because I asked so many questions. But like, most physicists don't think that the wave function is anything more than a statistical tool. Like, there's not a thing that's the wave function that is collapsing, and it's not a physical process. It's a statistical update in our information. It's like, oh, we have this little description of this system. Now we update it once we make a measurement. That's the collapse of the wave function. It's not a physical thing that's happening in the physics. And most physicists do not think that the wave function collapse is physical. It's just that it's an update in our knowledge. It's a statistical technique.
So let me give you my argument. Since I don't know if you agree with this, but I think you're kind of agreeing that quantum physics or mechanics does not depend on any classical physics. So what follows from that is that consciousness does not depend on it. It's irreducible to anything physical. So that's
wait. Where did consciousness even come from in that argument? Like, yes, I can agree that like quantum mechanics is like classical physics is contingent on quantum mechanics. I'm okay. I can acknowledge that quantum mechanics is more fundamental than classical mechanics. Okay, I'm with you there. Where did consciousness come into this syllogism? I don't know where that came from.
Well, it can't be part of the system.
Why not?
Because the system it can't be actualized by itself, because it comes into an infinite regress if otherwise. The von Neumann chain demonstrates that.
Okay, well, first of all, also von Neumann is also pretty fringe. Like, I'm just saying, like, yes, you can cite individual physicists that might have these ideas. Von Neumann was one of these guys that thought consciousness was integral in this, and he has the von Neumann chain. But the thing is, the von Neumann chain is not recognized or accepted by the physics community. Like, it was his little thought experiment, his little idea, but it's not like people say, yeah, that's legit, that's valid. It is not acknowledged like that. It is not. So it's
I think the problem is you're more focused on the scientific aspect of it, but not the metaphysics. I'm more focusing on the metaphysics of quantum mechanics or its implications metaphysically, and that might be the impasse we're talking. But can I move maybe into a different direction and maybe poke holes in your worldview and show you that you need God for to have reason, logic, any type of thing. So
Okay.
my first my first question, are you a nominalist or empiricist?
You know, I kind of sometimes it kind of depends on how I wake up in the morning. We'll just go with empiricist.
Nice. So the question is, how do you avoid affirming the consequent? And let me give you an example so you can respond to it. For example, universal propositions are those that attribute a common characteristic to all items, such as all men are mortal.
Mhm.
So induction, so you would operate through induction. However, commits the logical fallacy known as affirming the consequent. The structure of the fallacy is as follows: if P, then Q, and then number 2 would be Q is true, and then number 3, therefore P must be true. So you're affirming the consequent if you're an empiricist, if you want to affirm things like all men are mortal. So how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I don't know. Oftentimes I hear the people charging the scientific method with being affirming the consequent fallacy, where like you have a hypothesis, all men are mortal, then you test your hypothesis by going out there and looking for an immortal man. You don't find it, and your hypothesis was supported by your experiment. It's not like you've proved your hypothesis, you've only supported it with empirical data. So I don't think like the scientific method is an affirming the consequence fallacy just because you've got a hypothesis, you test it, and you confirm your hypothesis. That's not a logical fallacy.
So the problem is empiricism cannot produce universal propositions. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but I think it's good enough. Like it's good enough for me to where like, yeah, you can say like, oh, well, we can't empirically demonstrate that all men are mortal because it's not going to be possible to test every single man's mortality. And so you could say, oh, well, we can test a sample size and then we can maybe just like see if that's applicable to the population as a whole. But you're never going to be 100% generating a universal fact as like proven, you know? But it's good enough. It's good enough.
Well, I would say it's not because the problem of induction. Are you familiar with the problem of induction?
Yeah. Like Hume and his forks, I know,
Right.
but like, okay, that again, my stance on the problem of induction is it's good enough for me to lead my life. I don't like, I don't need to be 100% certain of things it's good enough for our human level of knowledge that we need on a day to day.
Well, you can say, are you because it looks like you're almost appealing to what they call practicalism.
Like, here's what I would say, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off right there.
No, go ahead.
Basically, like if I flip a coin 1,000,000 times and I get heads every single time with no exception, and I say, wow, looks like every time this coin is going to come up heads, and then I do it again and it's heads again. It's like at that point, if I've got 1,000,000 trial runs, man, it is good enough for me to make that conclusion and just say this coin is rigged and it's always going to pull up heads no matter what. And yes, that's a universal statement. And yes, what the 1,000,000 trials could have just gotten crazy lucky, and it didn't prove that coin is always going to come up heads, but it's good enough for anybody that's actually going to be putting money on that coin. Like if it's your money on the line, you're not going to sit there and say, well, I can't be 100% sure. If you've got $100, Praise, you're putting that $100 on heads every time because it was good enough to empirically determine just from the 1,000,000 trials, it was good enough for you to put your money on it. And that money, that's your life, that's your day to day. And I'm putting my money on empiricism.
Well, I mean, I do think that there's still, I would say foundational problems with that. For like, let's just say like the white swans. If you've seen a bunch of white swans, then your induction almost eliminates the possibility of there being a black swan. And we know we've seen black swans out there.
Yeah, so this is what I mean about scientific knowledge is always provisional. If we saw 1,000,000 white swans and we never saw a black swan, and the textbooks say all swans are white, but then hey, what happens when we discover a black swan? Then we update the textbooks because our knowledge changed with new information was presented. I consider that to be a strength of scientific knowledge, is that it gets more and more accurate when you get more and more information.
Well, so do you hold to that epistemology is knowledge is true justified belief?
You know, I can for the sake of this discussion, but I am aware of the problems with that. Like, I do have friends that are PhD philosophers, and I've asked, hey, is knowledge justified true belief? And then they're like, here's all of these papers. And I'm like, oh man, okay. So maybe there could be some flaws in that. I don't know what the best definition of knowledge is, but a working definition of justified true belief is like, it's fine. I don't really know what the best one is. I don't know.
Well, I do think if you know, I think most secular atheists do hold to that, but it's just, we'll put to the sake of the conversation, let me present the problem. You have a big problem known as the problem, it's still the problem of induction, which you can never have true justified beliefs because knowledge can never be established, because knowledge through induction can only be tentative or preliminary. So
Yeah.
you could never, yeah. I think you can see
I
that
would
issue.
I would just easily just counter that by saying knowledge is sufficiently justified belief. So I don't know, man. Like, if you tell me the sky is blue, and then I go and I look up at the sky and I see it's blue, that's going to be good enough for me to say I generated knowledge that the sky is blue empirically. That's going to be good enough for me. I mean, we're on the internet right now. That was developed through empirically derived knowledge. We didn't have the knowledge to make the internet. Now we do. That was empirically derived. I mean, I don't know, man. Even if I were to abandon all my empiricist tendencies and were to become a rationalist, idealist, I still could be an atheist. It doesn't get us any closer to any evidence for God.
Well, you can go to reformed epistemology, where God is the starting point of all knowledge, truth, and being. And this is where I'm getting at, because I'm trying to kind of poke, or take out the three-legged stool each one at a time. Like, bam, we take that out, and then you'll just see that your worldview collapses, and you'll see where I'm going with this. So
wait, Praise. Even if my worldview were to collapse, I still need a reason or evidence why I should go to your starting point. There was that I presuppose that God is the starting point for all of this, and that's what I need, a reason to presuppose. So that's what I need, is a reason to presuppose that God is the start of all this.
Well, I mean, everyone has presuppositions, though, Grayson. Like, so it's just that we all come into with a assumption before we come into a discussion. Like, you have materialist assumptions. I mean, come on, man. Like, that should be a given. And
I don't
for
know,
me,
man.
I have.
Wait.
Yeah.
Okay, so I do have certain assumptions, but I'm not sure if they are like inherently materialist or not, because my assumptions would basically just be the stuff that would be like countering solipsism, right? Like, I assume that I am not the only mind in the world. That's a presupposition that I have to have so that I'm not a solipsist. I acknowledge that, but I don't think that's inherently materialistic at all.
And what about, like, let's say, here's what I'm getting at too, is what philosophers call the preconditions of intelligibility. Let's say the reliability of memory, uniformity, those things you assume before coming into the conversation, and that's where I'm coming at.
I don't think that I assume those things, actually. Like, the reliability of my memories, well, they're not always reliable, but I do have like a lifetime of experience empirically checking the reliability of my memories versus the reality around me. I do that, so I know roughly a rough gauge of how reliable my memories are. It's not perfect, obviously. And then the second thing, could you remind me the second thing you said real quick? Sorry. You said uniformitary, right? I don't think that is an assumption that I make. Like, I would say that is basically demonstrated by our empirical observations to a sufficient degree where that I can inductively conclude that, but it's not like I'm going to say that I am presupposing it or it is 100% certain. It's just an inductive conclusion that is good enough based on the reliability of the observations that we do have.
So where does intelligibility come from?
From our, like, intelligibility as in our ability for our minds to understand the world around us?
Right. So what would endow you with that ability?
Well, my brain, which evolved alongside reality so that it could interpret reality in an advantageous way to survive and reproduce. So, that's a little bit empirical because obviously the brain's development is going to be checked against empirical reality. So if somebody's evolving a brain and they're seeing stuff that's not there, that's probably going to hurt their survivability. So there's a natural selection for the brains that are best at making the world around them intelligible. I don't know how to make that into a verb. Intelligilizing the world.
I mean, do you see the problem though? I think you just expressed the problem, because the like physical sciences, biology, physics, and then chemistry, those are for surviving. It's leading to survival, not truth. There's nothing inherent in any type of science that would equip you to think intelligibly or give you rationalization, reasoning. That's a huge issue.
I'd like to respond to that then. Yes, I think that you're correct in saying that the selective pressure is not for our brain's ability to discern what is true. It is our brain's ability to discern enough to survive and reproduce. And there is a distinction there. And I do agree with you that we are not evolved to discern the true reality. We do construct our own subjective model of reality, and it's not the truth. It is an illusion. But it has to be close enough to the truth that we can survive. So if your brain is telling you stuff that is so far from the truth, that's going to hurt your survival. In order for you to survive, if there's a predator behind you, you need to be able to discern that intelligibly and react accordingly, or you're not going to survive. So yes, the selection pressures are indirect, but is entailed in survivability is that your brain is capable of interpreting reality around it in an intelligible way so that you can survive.
But I'm talking epistemologically, propositionally, like logic, inference. There's nothing in nature that would instill that or endow that with you. So I'm saying
I disagree, though. I disagree. What I'm saying is that the pressures to survive are going to endow your brain with that, like over the course of generations of evolution, because your brain's ability to think rationally is going to help you survive.
No, I'd say like the law of the excluded middle, for example, or law of non-contradiction. These are like laws that govern rational thought. They're independent of nature. Nature doesn't change. Like nature changes all the time. Your brain chemistry in your physical body and everything else changes over time. These do not change. They're immutable. So I'm just talking.
We do disagree on this one, Praise. But again, this is just getting to the basis of our disagreement on me being a physicalist and you being an idealist. I would say that like the law of non-contradiction and things are because of the empirical reality that we live in. If we lived in a different reality, the laws of logic could be different. I'm saying the laws of logic are what they are because of the reality that we live in, not the other way around. And you say the other way around because you're an idealist. But again, I don't think that like physicalism versus idealism is the same thing as a debate between God and not God.
Well, so I'm talking about. So, are you saying the laws of logic are merely descriptive or perceptual? Like, their laws of logic are conceptual by definition. They are different categories. I think you're confusing perception with conceptual. So, conceptual and perceptual are different.
I would say like the axioms of logic are more descriptive of reality. I don't know if like what the state of the field of metaphysics is on that. I would need to read up more on that in order to like properly convey the consensus in metaphysics. But that's my intuition on it is that it's obviously descriptive of reality. Like the law of non-contradiction obviously does describe the reality around us, right?
Well, it describes it whether you looked at it or not. It's irrelevant if people look at it. So people looking at it didn't instantiate these laws. They would still be descriptive rather if humans or anything else existed, but they are prescriptive as well.
I would maintain that there would be no laws of logic if there were no, no observers or whatever, no conscious observers, because the laws of logic are descriptions that we created in our brains. So there's no brains, there's no laws of logic. Yes, there's still an objective universe out there. Like, if a tree falls in the forest, yes, I think that it makes vibrations in the air, but it doesn't make a sound until there's somebody to hear it. It's not a sound until somebody can hear it as a sound. It's just movements of air molecules. So, like, I do think that there is something very important about conscious perception in terms of logic, in terms of sound, and that kind of thing.
Well, that's not even categorically true in philosophy. These are a priori axioms. Things that are a priori are not dependent on human empirical investigation or anything that it involves the senses. So that's just definitionally untrue.
Well, I'm open to being wrong about this. I have not taken a course in logic, and I would not consider myself a logician, although I do have friends that do teach courses in logic. So I'm happy to ask them and see, maybe I'm off base about this. Like, I'm not claiming to be an expert on logic. I mean, other than, like, colloquially using logic, but I mean, like, actual formal logic.
Yeah,
I have not had a class in logic, so.
Well, I appreciate your humility there, and at least you admitted, like, I'm just right and you're wrong. Because a lot of atheists will just fight that back. So I appreciate that. Look into it. That these things are axioms. That they are a priori. They're not posteriori.
So okay, let me just go with this, right? Because this was your first argument, and I really want to bring it back to God or not God worldviews. So let's just, for the sake of this conversation, say, okay, I'm agreeing with you that the laws of logic are some ideal out there that were not created by humans. They're not descriptive of empirical reality. If I just become an idealist for the sake of this discussion, how do I get from there to God? You argued in your opening that there are certain properties that the laws of logic have that mean that whatever caused them must have those as well, and those properties align with the properties of God. That was the argument, right?
Correct. And I wouldn't even say they were created. I think that they're eternal. They've never had a beginning point. I know some people, like, I think Jay Dyer, I think he argues that they are created, but I don't take that position. I think they describe the mind of God, the Logos. Jesus, guess where the word logic came from? Yeah.
Wait, man, you just said that they're not descriptive. And okay, so you're saying that the laws of logic are descriptive. They're just not descriptive of empirical reality. They're descriptive of the mind of God. Correct.
Yeah, and natural reality follows. It obeys. It conforms to the laws of logic.
See, so, I think it's the other way around on that law, but I already conceded this for the sake of the discussion. So I don't want to just turn this into a whole idealist versus physicalist debate, right? I want to get to the evidence for God. So I'm with you here. The laws of logic, whatever, they're past eternal or whatever, but you said, I'm confused because I think in your actual slide, you said that it was a metaphysical principle that the effect has the same properties of the cause or something like that. Right. And so if they're eternal, then how do they have like, if they never came into being, then where's the cause come in?
Well, not specifically with the laws of logic, but things that do have a cause, they obey the laws of logic. So let's say that you fall downwards. Well, that's because gravity's there. So you cannot fall downwards and upwards at the same time. So let's say like, I mean, I know in space there is, I mean, gravity is not effective or whatever. Let's say on Earth, like you jump off a mountain cliff, you can only go downwards. You're not going to fall downwards and upwards unless there's something there to push you upwards.
Okay, I'll agree with that. Let's get to where God comes into this. So I agree that whatever, man. reality obeys the laws of logic. I'm with you on this for the sake of argument. I can
Right.
agree up to all this.
So since the laws are immaterial, like you can't use a microscope to investigate the law of identity. You can't test in a test tube. You're not going to look through it through like a telescope and find, oh look, there it is floating around in the space, the law of identity. So these things are immaterial.
I again, I just disagree with this, but this is just back to me being a physicalist.
Okay.
Like the law of identity is an actual concept that's in my brain, which can be examined with the
You
microscope.
can extract it from your brain, the
Yeah.
law of identity.
Yeah.
Come on,
you're laughing,
Grayson.
but
Come
you
on,
can
man.
actually- you can actually decode these things from neural activity. There are neural correlates for all of these things. Like I know that in the lead up to this debate, you were ragging on me for like saying, "Oh, Grayson, where is intentionality? You're not going to find intentionality in the brain." But like, yes, you can. And I brought a study tonight showing exactly that, where intentionality is in the brain and how it changes. And it's not just like, oh, excitement or raw emotions. Like it's actually context dependent. And you can see the neural firings in the parietal lobe that correspond with that
I would
person's
agree.
intention.
Yeah, again, like Libet's experiment showed that involuntary actions in your body, like they can find those involuntary ones, but the voluntary ones that are not mappable in the brain. There's been
They are.
No,
Right,
Peter. No.
Look,
That is-
let me try to
That's
find
so
this study. No, it's okay. I'm just trying to figure out where the study is so I can share the screen. Sorry. And I've got another one showing these things that you say are these immutable things like morality or whatever, and that you can change that too by changing the brain chemistry. Here we go. The effect of context and reason on neural correlates of intentions. I think maybe Donnie stepped away, so you can't see my screen. But yes, you can decode across different contexts. You can evidence against context invariant information in all regions of interest. The results suggest that neural states associated with intentions are modulated by the context of the action. So they actually found, like, they were mapping people's intentions and seeing how that changes depending on the context of their decisions. And they were seeing that in real time in the brain. It's not just like they're reading emotions or whatever. It's the actual reasoning, the actual intentionality, the agency that does have neural correlates in the brain. It's not like these things are non-physical.
I would just respond with Peter C's research. Are you familiar with Peter C?
Can you spell C? Is it just a letter?
TSE, yeah, Peter Say or C. I don't. Yeah.
No, I'm not.
Well, I mean, he did numerous papers on like causation, free will, intentionality, and he says that yes, there are choices that we do that only cannot be attributed to, let's say, like involuntary consciousness. There are other things outside of that. Like I want to get married. Let's say getting married. They've demonstrated that type of intentionality.
Yeah, but here's the
not
thing, Praise, is that still physically, that still has a physical neural correlate in the brain. Even those high level executive functioning type intentions, you've still got neural correlates for them here. And for the example that I'd like to provide, there was a study that changed people's moral compasses by exposing them to a strong enough magnetic field. They had them take a little moral survey beforehand and make moral judgments and moral decisions. High level processing, like free will type of processing, and they were able to change their results if they just turned on a magnetic field. The decisions that they said were immoral before became much more morally gray and ambiguous. And they were saying that when they turned on the magnetic field, oh, well, suddenly somebody who tried to hurt somebody else, it's not morally wrong if they were not successful. And so it actually changes morality, which you would say is non-physical, but like they're in a classic scientific experiment to determine causation. You manipulate the independent variable and see how the dependent variable is affected. They manipulated the independent variable, the neurons in the brain, and they changed the dependent variable, which was the person's morality, which you're saying is non-physical and not in the brain. I mean, the experiment seems to suggest that it is.
Well, no, I think that people's thoughts can be manipulated, yes, and it could, like, it's sort of like, you know, if you break a finger off or one of those keys in the piano, like it still works, but it'll never work to the same degree that it did before through you know, certain things that can blind, you know, morality or something like that. But the morality I'm talking about even goes beyond that. Like, let's say super erogation. That's something that the brain doesn't is irrelevant to, like, supererogatory action.
Oh,
So
why would that be the case? I need an argument to justify that claim, because, and this is awesome to get into the supererogative stuff, because that was a new word for me, which I'm excited about. I'll have to look that up. But you defined it as morally good acts that are not necessary or obligatory. So I want to ask you about, I would consider there to be examples of supererogatory morally good actions in the animal kingdom, like a dog that sacrifices its life for its human master or something, or a dog that does some sort. We're all familiar with the stories of dogs doing these feats of heroism to save a small drowning child or something like that. Is that not a supererogative, morally good action, but it's an animal doing it that you don't even believe has free will or a soul?
good question. So the point is, animals, if they even did like what you would call altruistic acts or even supererogatory-esque, they would still be illusory or non-real, because natural selection doesn't involve selecting moral or altruistic traits. Let me quote Richard Dawkins.
It does, though, Praise. I definitely think it does. And I can cite, I don't have the study tonight to cite, but Robert Sapolsky has cited it. That's where I became aware of it, of this mole rat study, where basically it was really fascinating. They determined how many mole rats another mole rat would sacrifice its own life for. I don't know how they did the experimental setup for that. I don't think I want to know. But basically what they found is that it totally depended on the genetics. So you'd share 50% of your DNA with your siblings. So they found that 2 or more siblings would be enough for a naked mole rat to sacrifice itself. But you only share 1/8 of your genetic material with your cousins. So what they found is that 2 or more cousins, not going to cut it. But more than 8 cousins, then it's enough for a naked mole rat to sacrifice its own life. So you can find these altruistic behaviors like programmed into the instincts of mammal brains. And we've seen experiments where they do these altruistic, self-sacrificing behaviors, and there's a pattern to it, and it comes down to ensuring that your genetic material is passed down through the genetic lines of others, not yourself.
Let me respond to that. So Richard Dawkins, in his book called The Selfish Gene, said organisms are viewed as survival machines built by genes to ensure their propagation. So if biology is just merely for propagation, of ensuring to move for the next generation of your offspring, it's survival machines. It means biology does not instill some type of morality, because moral traits, I would say that they're meta-ethical. They go beyond anything physical or biological in the first place. Like moral propositions by definition are defined as immaterial, and what I mentioned in my opening was sui generis. So they're a kind of they're metaphysically unique.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I don't really. Okay, so the way that I perceive these morals is that they're basically subjective preferences, and they're a mix of nature and nurture. So you do have some natural tendencies towards moral behaviors in social groups. Like you can find babies might have certain like moral instincts. You can find animals in social groups that have their own sort of innate rules that would say, in a group dynamic, this kind of behavior is allowable and encouraged, and this kind of behavior is shunned, and you'll get kicked out of the group. We see that in animals. It seems totally natural. And then you also have, nature plus nurture. You get humans that come up with some really, really weird moral rules. Like, I've had people say that it is immoral for me to put pineapple on pizza. Like, and they'll say, oh, yeah, and they get all upset about it. It's like there are so many arbitrary rules that different cultures on Earth have for their morals that, like, it seems obvious to me that it's a mix of nature and nurture and not some objective, immaterial thing that is imposed upon us because everybody's got their own different idea about it.
So, I mean, so there's a difference between moral agents and moral subjects. I think you're confusing those. Interpreting actions such as supererogatory actions implies that animals understand the value of their actions and choose to go beyond duty. And they just don't even have that capability. So they're moral subjects, not moral agents. Humans are moral agents. There's a difference. There's a huge ontological distinction. And given the current understanding of animal cognition, they don't possess complex moral deliberation. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, elephants, some of the greater apes, like, it seems like they are actual agents. I don't know exactly what, like, you have to have some evidence or reason that would make you claim that they're subjects rather than agents. Like, I'm okay with saying that some, like, some animals that are clearly not conscious, like insects or whatever, I'm okay with that. But, like, for the conscious ones, like mammals are definitely conscious. So, like, I don't know, man, if they seem like agents to me.
Well, again, they don't have the set of like, we're endowed with a little bit higher, a lot higher ability to deliberate and to intellectualize and to what I call, like, when you look inward, they call it introspect. Animals don't introspect.
I don't know that I don't know how you would possibly know that, Praise. I don't know how you can claim that an animal doesn't introspect. I've never been a bunny. I've never been a dog. I don't know what it's like to be one of those. I can't make claims about it either. I don't know how you can.
Well, I mean, so it's like supererogatory acts often, I mean, they involve personal sacrifice, effort, resource without any direct personal benefit. From the evolutionary perspective, behaviors that incur costs without corresponding to benefits are less likely to be favored. It doesn't fit into that paradigm. Like, supererogatory acts are unique for a reason because they go beyond obligation.
I will say, Praise, real quick, man. In terms of evolution, you don't think about individuals, you think about populations of populations of species and genes or whatever. And altruism can be beneficial on the population level and on the gene population level. So, like, I think it's just not really the correct way to think about what is selected for in evolution. It's selecting on populations. So, like, an altruistic population is going to be more successful than a non-altruistic population where everybody is just out for themselves, because, like, the people come together, they share resources, and together they become stronger than a bunch of, what's the phrase? Like, they're trying to herd cats or whatever, too many cooks in the kitchen, that kind of thing.
Well, you're running into, I'm gonna have to clarify this. Well, I think you're arguing fallaciously. So are you saying that nature is good? Are you saying that nature can achieve good?
No, I would say that good and evil are, like, subjective preferences. So I have my own preferences of good and evil. You've got yours. And yeah, I mean, like, I can only approach things from my framework, or I can try to understand things from yours. But
You just proved my point. See, there's things that go beyond nature real good. Like the good, like, let's say the concept of goodness. You can't empirically test that. You can't find that. There's nothing you can scientifically test to find that. Because
absolutely, it's in your brain.
It's in your brain.
Yes.
So show me what does good taste like? What does it look like then, Grayson? Give us the physical properties.
First of all, it does not follow that just because something is physical, that therefore it tastes like and looks like something. Okay, like, you don't taste. What's
the texture? Tell me what's the texture?
It's whatever your neural matter. I've never eaten brain before. I don't know, Praise, what the texture is or the taste. But the point is that our thoughts are produced by neural activity in our brain, and it's the certain patterns, like, which are a certain pattern in physical space that correlate with certain thoughts. And these are events that are happening. Our thoughts, our processes, they're actions that are occurring in our brain with the motion of molecules. So yes, all of these thoughts that you're bringing up, all these concepts do physically exist in processes that are happening in our brains.
You're running into a huge problem here, Grace. Let me tell you. So you're an moral anti-realist. I'm a moral realist. So if you're arguing that things are inherently good in nature, that's a naturalistic fallacy. You're saying because it's natural, therefore it's good.
I didn't say that things are inherently good in nature. I even said the opposite of that. I said it's the good and evil are my own subjective preferences. And yes, that just because I have subjective preference about something, that doesn't mean that it's like.
You just said it's in the brain. You said that good is in the brain. You just argue that. You just contradicted yourself.
Yeah, I don't think that that's a contradiction. Could you explain
It
to me?
is.
Could you explain to me why you think it's a contradiction?
Because goodness either has non-natural properties or natural properties. You said they have natural properties, but then that's tantamount to saying that it's natural, therefore it's good. It's the same thing as what you're saying.
No, it's not, because like evil is the same, also has naturalistic properties the same as good does. So it doesn't follow that just because something is natural, therefore it's good. Because in this conception, if you want to extend natural to just be like the opposite of supernatural, and so by natural you just mean like physical or material, then everything would be that. And so good, evil, all my preferences. I have preferences about like, you know, my favorite condiments. And so like that's also going to be in my brain. That would also be natural according to your definition. I think I just misunderstood what you meant by natural. I thought like nature versus nurture kind of a thing, to where like but if you're just saying natural versus supernatural, then yes, it's all natural.
You still run the problem though, but if you're a moral if you're a moral naturalist, then they're illusory by definition. Under my paradigm, they're only real. They have a real presence or real properties.
Praise, I am a moral anti-realist. Yes, I think they're just subjective preferences.
Then everything's illusory to you morally. So why would you say that animals could do good deeds and good things? That's illusory.
Because I still have my subjective preferences from which I can make moral judgments. It doesn't matter that they're subjective and not objective. I still have my preferences. Just like the same thing, if I have a preference for ketchup over mustard, I know objectively it's not like there's one that's better than the other, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't care about the fact that I prefer ketchup to mustard. It's still my preference, and it's still important to me. The same with my morals.
Have you ever heard of cultural relativism?
Yes.
Everyone has their preferences. What makes your preference better than someone else's preference?
Because they're my preference.
So they're yours.
Yeah. So I'm going to make moral judgments according to my moral preferences because that's my perspective.
Well, Hitler had his preferences too.
Yeah, exactly. And there are some people out there that think mustard is better than ketchup, but I disagree with them. You know, I think ketchup is better. And at the end of the day, you know, I'm going to try to make the argument that ketchup is better than mustard in the same way that I would argue, well, not the same way, but I would probably make a stronger argument that my morals are going to be better than Hitler's morals. Okay, it's a little bit beyond mustard and ketchup.
It just spirals into people's preferences, which is a sea of subjectivity, man.
Yes.
Like, come to the God side. Come to Christianity, man.
Congratulations. Morals are subjective.
No.
You might not like that, but it is true. So you just got to kind of accept the truth.
Is it objectively subjective?
Objectively subjective? No, I don't know.
You just refuted your own point. If morals were subjective in an objective sense, then you should say it. Morals are subjective objectively. You have an onus of proof on you to show that subjective morals are objectively subjective.
Okay, the reason I was hesitant, Praise, was because it's worded really weird.
Gotcha, buddy. Gotcha.
Gentlemen, that was a fast-paced, over an hour. That was over an hour worth of banter, sparring, shot for shot. Very good, enlightening discussion, stimulating discussion. That's what we'll say. So appreciate it, gentlemen. I think we did touch on all the major points to give the audience a good session, a good discussion to hopefully objectively analyze each other's positions, God versus non-God worldview, which is true.